Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Inside Guns with your host, me, the Yankee Marshal. Today, I want to take some time to go over all of the lies that came out of President Biden's recent press conference where he talked about how he's going to be combating gun violence in this country, how they're going to put a stop to all this. And this is probably going to take the whole show because these lies were numerous. I'm going to deal with what I consider to be the biggest ones today. And I'm also going to spend some time covering not only the lies, but after that, I want to talk about the bullying and the perceived threats he made. I don't think they're even very thinly veiled threats he made against people who would dare to rebel against the government, of which he is part. So, like I said, settle in. This is going to be the whole show. I've even got myself some water here because this is not going to be a show where I do segments. But let's get on to Biden's press conference, where he basically talked about how he's going to violate the Second Amendment while claiming he's not violating the Second Amendment. Because that was his whole point. We're not changing it, we're enforcing it. And then he went on to lie about what the Second Amendment says and what it's about, and to deny the actual true meaning of the Second Amendment. So let's go over some of that right now. They did everything except address what would really actually stop violence in this country. You know, they didn't discuss anything that would actually bring down the levels of crime, and especially violent crime in this country, which aren't high right now. Let's keep that in mind. They're nothing like the 80s and the 90s. But there has been a small blip because of the pandemic, and they're, like I said, not leaving this tragedy unexploited. So let's get into the things he said here, one by one, just the main things, and let's talk about them. First, he claims the Second Amendment has always limited who can own what, who can own arms and what they can own. That was his big claim right off the bat, that the amendment that says the government shall not infringe on people's rights has always been about infringing on people's rights, which was one of the most ridiculous things I've ever heard a politician say. Because no, the Second Amendment has not decided who can hold what items and what they can hold. It doesn't do that, period. In fact, it was set up to be the exact opposite. Now, there are some people that are considered not to be free citizens. If that's what you want to say, well, yeah, back then, people who weren't free citizens, blacks, convicts, etc., they couldn't exercise their rights because they weren't citizens. But if you were a citizen, there was no regulation on who could own something or what they could own. Period. Historians agree. In fact, as they were trying to fact check his speech yesterday, they were like, we can't find any historians that say that it has limited. Now, there have been limitations on to where and when. Like there have historically been limitations not based on the Second Amendment, but from the government of you can't carry your firearms into a saloon, or you can't carry it into like a trial or a state building during a trial. Things like that have existed. But as far as the Second Amendment restricting who can own what has never been the case. In fact, it's the opposite. So that's just a huge lie. Lying through his teeth right there. Then he made a statement that he said, this is kind of like proof of what I'm saying. He says, you couldn't own cannons. I can't remember if he said during the Revolutionary War or the Civil War. Either way, it doesn't make sense because you could. In fact, you could own cannons up till the 1930s in this country. You could purchase them up till the 1930s in this country. And I seem to remember that Revolutionary War and Civil War were both before that. And if he was saying Revolutionary War, which like I said, I can't remember right now, that's stupid because that was us. That wasn't our laws. That was the English laws. We didn't have government law, federal government laws during the Revolutionary War. So if he said during the Civil War, it's ridiculous. A lot of the cannons put in use were privately owned at the time. So that was a ridiculous statement. Historians tore that apart. It was garbage. In fact, I know people that own cannons, my family included, because if you had them before the I think it was 38, around 1940, if you owned them up until then, they were grandfathered in. You could keep them. So a lot of families still have them in their families. So that's demonstrably false what he said. The lie he told to illustrate the other lie he told is easily disproven. Easily disproven. So another case there, lying through his teeth. And I don't understand this, why they feel the need to lie. because it's so easily caught. But the reason is because most people who are following him want to believe him. And they're not going to bother to check up on this stuff. They're not going to see if he's lying. And, I noticed the media was so quick to jump on Trump every time he exaggerated anything. I don't see CNN and MSNBC jumping over these two big lies, this big primary lie, and then the secondary lie he told to illustrate his primary lie. Where are the fact checkers on this? I had to resort to the internet and going to universities and colleges that have been doing fact checking on such speeches and seeing what they found. But it seems like the media is not interested in Biden's lies, only in Trump's lies. So, and I'm all for calling out liars, but you got to do it across the board. They don't seem to be interested in doing that. Another thing he kind of made the impression of during his speech that I think is a total fallacy is he made it sound like there's all these illegal gun runners, all these gun shops that are selling guns illegally. And that's where all the crime is coming from, all these illegal guns. Well, first off, there's no such thing as an illegal gun, really. People can do illegal things with guns, and people can make guns non-compliant. They're not like aliens. They're not committing a crime. The people are the ones that commit the crime. But first off, let's just say, his whole notion is stupid. FFLs are pretty tightly regulated. They're not selling thousands of guns without background checks. There's not some gun manufacturer in California or gun seller in Texas that's ordering 1,000 ARs and then only doing background checks on 2 of them. That's not happening. The occasional guns that get bought in a non-legal manner usually are straw purchases. So that's the number one way that people who can't buy a gun get one without committing a crime themselves. They have someone else commit a crime, purchasing the gun for them. That's straw purchase. That happens. Also, where are all these guns that are supposedly illegal being used in crimes? Because when you look at actual statistics about where guns come from, even when they're possessed by people who are prohibited from owning them, like gang members, underage people, etc., they're stolen. They were originally purchased with a background check by a non-restricted person in a legal manner. So if most of the guns in crimes are stolen when they're in possession of a prohibited person, where are all these illegal guns going from? Where's this big trafficking? There should be tons of crimes. Every time they arrest a gangbanger and he's got a gun on his belt, it should just be a gun that, hey, last time we ever saw anything about it, it was being transferred to a dealer in Florida. Then no one's owned it since then. That's not the case. It's usually, yeah, this gun was on a theft report. Or this gun was sold to this person and it was stolen from them. That's where the guns are coming from, not these big bands of illegal gun runners inside the United States. Now, we do have some cases of huge gun running in the United States. There's some smaller cases, places on the border, etc. But the biggest gun runner of illegal guns is the government. Under Bush, under Clinton, under Obama even. Under Trump even still. They're the biggest runner of illegal guns because they love to give all these guns to the cartels and then be like, well, when they commit crimes, we'll be able to know who did it with what gun. Well, who fucking cares? That's just so you could demonize the gun. Look, all these guns flow into the cartel. Yeah, you're sending them to them. So they did that. Basically, that wasn't about catching anyone or making any difference in crime. That was about being able to demonize firearms because they wanted to be able to say, look, all these guns we seized were illegally shipped to Mexico from America. We need to crack down on all these guns coming from America to Mexico when it was the government sending them. They basically decided they wanted to crack down on gun manufacturing and transportation and interstate commerce and all this other stuff. So they needed a reason to do it. So they transported a bunch of illegal guns into the hands of criminals and then went, oh my God, look what's happening. But unfortunately, they got seen through on that. Stuff leaked. People found out about things and didn't turn out too good for them in the end. No one's really suffered any consequences of it, but they didn't get what they wanted. They didn't get their end goal. They didn't get to hold that up as an example of why we need gun control because people found out what they were doing. So there is a bunch of illegal gun trafficking going on, but it's the government doing it. Not the people. There are not a lot of people out there getting 1,000 guns from an FFL or from a distributor and then just willy-nilly distributing them illegally across state lines and stuff. It's just not happening. It's not worth it. To do it at a scale where it would be worth it, you would be very visible. And I'm not saying the occasional dealer hasn't said, I need money right away, and I've got these guns laying here, and I'm just going to sell them as from my private collection to an individual, which doesn't require a background check. That happens, but it's not rare. It's very rare any of those are ever used at a crime. So unless that was where the major source of guns were coming from for crimes, then it's not a problem. In fact, I don't even believe in a lot of the restrictions there are on transporting guns right now. So why try to fix a problem that doesn't exist? Well, that's the government. They do it for power. With that being said, like I say, this huge network of gun running is not going on in this country except for from the government itself. Now, this is the point where I'm going to take a break, drink a little bit of water here because I'm getting all dry mouthed. You know, when I get irate, I get dry mouth. All right, now let's move on. Another thing he said that was just blatantly a lie, let's get that out of the frame there, was talking about how background checks and having controls on who can buy a gun has stopped 3 million crimes. Maybe even 3 million murders, which is bullshit. They always base these numbers on how many denials NUKES puts forward. Well, every time we do a denial, that's stopping a crime. That's not the case. Even if you look at recently where they said NUKES over the last year's done a record 300,000 denials. They've stopped 300,000 crimes. No, they didn't. Considering the fact that the vast majority of NUKES denials, when they allow for people to protest, on appeal, they're overturned because it was a false reason for denying them. In fact, last number I saw was about, I can't remember if it was 94 or 97% of all NUKES denials got overturned on review. So that's not a good record. That's meaning they're not stopping 300,000 crimes. They're denying like 297,000 legal or 295,000 legal citizens the right to purchase a firearm, to exercise their Second Amendment rights. That's a great infringement on people. If you actually looked at the numbers of, like, if they say 10 people can't buy guns and only one of them turns out to actually be prohibited, well, then they didn't stop one crime. They denied 9 people their constitutional rights. 9 out of 10 people get denied their rights. That's the way to look at that. And even the ones that do get denied that are criminals, under the law, criminals, denied people. If you look at most of them, did they stop a crime by preventing that person buying a gun? No. Not usually. Because usually it's a case of a person's like 58 years old, went to go buy a gun and like, oh yeah, that's right, I had a felony conviction when I was 17 for some minor crime. I pled to this or I pled to that and oh, I forgot all about that. And now I don't have my rights because of that. That's usually the case. It's not someone like, I'm going to go out and commit a crime and I'm a prohibited person, but I'm going to go to the gun store and try to buy one legally first. They don't do that. If criminals know to go get their guns different ways, they steal them. Usually how they get them. They steal them or they buy them on the street from someone who specializes in stealing them. Criminals that, by the way, a lot of the people who run stolen guns on the street, law enforcement knows about them. But they don't put a stop to them. They don't put a stop to the person dealing in the guns because they would rather see who they deal to and then catch all those people each time to make it look like, look, we're stopping this mass crime spree by stopping all these people who got illegal guns. When really they could just stop the guy trafficking them, the criminal that's stealing them, and just put it into it at all. But that's not good press because they get good press when they stop 10 guys who buy illegal guns, way more than they stop one guy gun trafficking. So they know about most of the traffickers, just like how they know about most drug houses and most drug dealers. But it's better for their business if they catch the people coming and using and not go after the people actually dealing, because that gives them a steady supply of criminals to put in prison and profit off of. That's one of the main things that's wrong with our criminal justice system, and it's the same thing with guns. They aren't stopping crimes. They're preventing the old guy who forgot he had a felony record from buying a gun. Or even if a person was a criminal, the fact that they're buying a gun, didn't know they were prohibited or didn't think they'd get caught, That doesn't mean they were buying it to commit a crime. Maybe they're buying it for self-defense. Maybe they just got divorced and their husband's threatening them, but they had a criminal record. So you can't say that they've stopped this many crimes because they had that many denials, because really the way to look at that is they denied rights to like 93% of the people that they prevented from buying a gun. They infringed on that 93 to 97% of people. And the 3 to 7% of people that actually were deniable, that actually had just cause to be denied, there's no evidence they were going to commit a crime. So you don't get to say we stopped that many crimes even. So that's just ridiculous bullshit. And they love to use that lie, but it is a lie. It is an out and out lie. So, I mean, these are some of the lies he told. These are some of the biggest lies. Oh, that the Second Amendment never protected your right to own wherever you want to own. Yes, it did. It exactly did. There were no limitations on who could own what. There were limitations on where you could have it and when, like you couldn't bring it to your court case or your hearing, things like that. But there were no regulations. Oh, you couldn't own cannons during the Revolutionary War or Civil War. Yeah, you could. That's just blatantly false. In fact, like I said, up till the late 30s, I believe, I don't know the exact date, you could own cannons just anywhere until they, denoted the big bore cannons as destructive devices or something. So, and if you had them at that point, you can keep them. I know lots of people that have them. There's places, a lot of small towns now on the 4th of July, families bring out their family cannon and they set it off on the 4th of July. It's not uncommon. So another lie there. Just lies and lies and lies. Lies about the illegal guns. Lies about stopping crimes. It was just lie after lie to justify their opinion that they are going to do away with the Second Amendment, pretty much. Because they're saying, we're not changing it, we're just enforcing it. But you're enforcing a false interpretation of it. So that's basically ignoring the Second Amendment. And I think that's what they're trying to do now. They know that they can't pass these anti-gun laws while the Second Amendment exists. So they're trying to pervert it and pretend that's the way it's always been. It's kind of like when they say, well, the courts always upheld that the Second Amendment was a collective right. No, the courts did not uphold that. It had just never been challenged in a significant way up until that point, up until Heller. The courts didn't ever make a ruling saying the Second Amendment is a collective right. The Supreme Court never did that. So that's bullshit too. They just lie to get their way. I never understood. It's both sides lie. They all lie about something. Every politician has one big lie they love to tell, and it seems like most of the Democrats, it's always about the Second Amendment for some reason. So just lies. And now that I've talked about his lies, I want to move on real quick here and talk about his threats. Because he also made a point of saying the Second Amendment is not about defending against a tyrannical government. It's not about the people being able to defend against their government, which is exactly what it was written for. That's exactly why it was written. To say that is ridiculous. That is one of the most un-American and ridiculously stupid things I've ever heard said about the Second Amendment. The Founding Fathers all made it clear that that's what it was for. To fight threats both foreign and domestic. Your own government, to defend against tyranny. That's what the Second Amendment is for. That's why it's there. So to deny that that's why it exists, you're just trying to rewrite the Second Amendment. You're trying to rewrite history. It's revisionist history. Because they know they can't get what they want to get while it exists, so they have to now. And they know they can't repeal it, so let's change the meaning of it. And that's what they're trying to do. And in so, making threats. Because he said, after he claimed that that's not what it's about, he's like, it wouldn't do any good. You couldn't, with small arms like ARs and blah, 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 you couldn't fight the government. We have F-16s and nukes. He was basically saying you would need those. Just like Swalwell, how he threatened to nuke civilians before if they rebelled. Biden's doing the same thing. By saying this, you're implying that if the people in numbers ever rose up against the government, which in my opinion would indicate the government's wrong to make the people actually rise up in a guerrilla warfare type of situation, that the federal government, him included, instead of admitting they're wrong and bowing down and surrendering power to the people, they would go as far as to wage open warfare with F-16s and bombs and up to nuclear weapons on American soil. That was a threat. Not even a thinly veiled one. That if you all ever do rise up against us, We're going to send planes after you and bombs after you and nukes after you before we surrender our power. That was a threat. And to me, that makes him unfit for office. Just like I said, Swalwell was unfit for office. That statement alone made Biden unfit for office. He should be impeached for that statement. I'm not one who calls for impeachment lightly, etc., but that statement he should be impeached for. He basically told American citizens, if you rise up, we'll nuke you. So unless you have nukes, you better not try it. Like I said, unfit for service. That's just horrible. And even there's a lesser side to that that's even not as bad, but still pretty bad. You're the commander-in-chief. You're the head of the military. And you're going to sit here and tell me that you've never seen an uprising that was outgunned by their government succeed? That can't happen? That's odd. I think our history is steeped in that. And I think we have a history of supporting groups overseas that are doing exactly that, guerrilla warfare. I think we've seen a lot of successes in that, especially against foreign powers or corrupt powers. How many corrupt powers have we seen fall because the citizens fought back? Now, in a lot of countries, they have to have the military backing them if they do it because they don't have guns. But in countries where the people are armed and they have insurgencies, look what happens quite often. Are you going to pretend that that's not a thing? You're supposed to be leading the military and you don't understand the basic principles and realities of guerrilla warfare and diametrically opposed forces? You don't understand the realities of that? I mean, even look in countries where things like the Taliban exist and they're well armed. They're still there. They're taking back over now because they have the ability to fight. I'm not saying they're on the right side, but I'm just showing you. Determined people, even if they're incredibly outgunned, can still make a difference, especially if they sway public interest and public opinion. Look at the civil rights movement. They didn't fire a shot. They linked arms and were peaceful. And they were greatly outnumbered and greatly outgunned. But because people watching it went, wow, those people are right and the powers that be are wrong, things went in their favor. That's the way war works sometimes. And the very fact that Biden doesn't understand that shows me once again he's unfit to be commander-in-chief. But like I said, all the lies he told, politicians lying, that's nothing new. That's almost expected. But the statements he made about threatening American citizens with open warfare, that veiled threat of you better not try it unless you got planes and nukes. So we're in power forever because you won't be able to take it back from us. That whole statement, like I said, that disqualifies him from office. He should be impeached for that. I don't understand why people are giving him a pass on that. I don't understand why people gave Swalwell a pass on that. When politicians threaten the people and point out to them that if you ever rise up against us, you're doomed because we will nuke you. Whenever they do something like that, they should be immediately removed from office. And in this case, Biden is no exception.